In the early days of TV, advertisers developed the first TV commercials, and they had to come up with ways to connect their consumers with their products. And one of the ways was to develop a mascot. Tony the Tiger was one of the first. He's been around for almost 70 years. And today, if you see Tony the Tiger, you know Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. It's just, they go hand in hand, you know instantly, because you grew up with Tony. Another method was to, that developed later on, was to create a solution for a problem. Advertising switched from focusing on the product so much and telling us about the product as it did focusing now on the consumer and a problem that we may have and how their product is going to fix our problem. And that method of fixing a problem lays at the heart of a marketing experiment that I was part of over 20 years ago. Before I went to seminary, I needed to finish my bachelor's degree, and I couldn't work full-time, be a full-time mom and go to school full-time, but yet we still needed money, so I needed to find a part-time job, give up my full-time and find a part-time job. And Radio Shack hired me as a sales associate. Now, the only person more surprised than I was that Radio Shack hired me was my husband, who exclaimed, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "Did they actually interview you and meet you, or did they just draw your name out of a hat?" Because what my husband knew to be true about me was I knew nothing about electronics. I couldn't even operate the ones we owned. I'd have to call our middle school children down to do it for me. But here's why I was hired. When the manager called me back for a second interview, he said, "I have this crazy idea, but I want you to hear me out." He said, "I know you know nothing about electronics." I said, "Well, you got me there." He said, "But I do." He said, "And what you know about people, I don't know." He said, "Not only do you have people skills," he said, "but you can read people." He said, "You intuitively can read a person, know what they're thinking, feeling, and hone in on that." And he said, "I can't do that." He said, "And I think that skill that you have is what's lacking in my sales approach." And he said, "And I think together, if we teach each other, and we can come up with a method that will help me meet my goal." He said, "I want this store to be number one in the district, number one in the region, and to someday crack the top 10 and become a top 10 store in the nation, even number one." And I thought, well, there's no pressure there. So here's what we did. For the first 2 weeks I worked, I shadowed him. And I watched the interaction between him and the customer, and I read their body language. And then I would go take notes at my desk in the back room. And keep in mind, this is the early days of home computers and cell phones. They were just coming into vogue and just getting their feet on the ground. And that's what a bulk of the people were coming in, wanting to know more about computers and cell phones. And what I noticed was he was brilliant. And he would start telling them all the technical stuff about these computers and this cell phone. And within 30 seconds, their eyes would glaze over. And most of the time, he couldn't close a sale because they were more confused when we were done than when they came in, and they would just wander off lost and go home. So at the end of those 2 weeks, we talked about that and put a plan into place for the next 2 weeks. So for the next 2 weeks, he shadowed me. Actually, for me, he was my safety net in case they ask a technical question, things like how to turn the machine on. He was there. But what I instinctively started every conversation out with was, what brought you in? What about a computer prompted your curiosity to see if it's for you? Do Do you have children that you want to see if it can help them with their schoolwork and their homework? Do you own a home-based business or a small business downtown that you want to see about the possibility of record keeping and helping you in your business? And whatever answer they gave me, I would hone in on that and give them examples of how, if it was a small business or a home-based business like Tupperware, how record keeping on the computer was going to make their life so much easier and free up so much time that they could use then to either put back into their business and other money-making avenues, or have some of that much wanted and much desired family time with the free time that it's freed up. At the end of the 2 weeks, just doing this hit and miss, whatever felt right method, we realized that we had closed 50% more sales than we had the 2 weeks before that. And so we started honing this consumer-driven, problem-solving method of sales. And at the end of 3 years, by the time I left, we were consistently ranked number one in the district, number one in the region. We hadn't made it to number one in the nation yet, but we had cracked the top 10 and had been number 10 several times. And I know this sounds like a marketing class, Marketing 101, but it actually has everything to do with the scripture lesson we read in church this morning. In church, we heard the story of Jesus calling his first disciples, and about how a disciple who Jesus called was so excited at meeting Jesus and what the interaction with Jesus Christ had done for him in just that short period of time, that he went off excited to tell his friend Nathaniel, and Nathaniel was skeptical. And he had questions. And Philip said, well, come and see. Now, you see, come and see, that's marketing. In fact, at Radio Shack, when my regular customers found out that I was leaving and that I was going to become a pastor, they were taken back. And they said, well, isn't that a huge jump from salesperson to pastor? I said, not really. I just have a better product. As a pastor, I get to sell Jesus. And believe it or not, as crude as that sounds, that's exactly what evangelism is. That's exactly what sharing our faith is. In a way. Now, it's not that crass, and there's a lot more finesse to it than that. But you see, so many of us are afraid to share our faith. One, because we think it's private. No, our faith is never meant to be private. We were given our faith so that we could share it with others. It's personal, but it's not private. Our society is so used to having Jesus Christ and Christianity shoved down our throats in unpleasant ways. Drive down the road. See how long it takes you to see a billboard that says, if you die tonight, do you know where you're going? Or get your act together so you don't go to hell. We've all had family members or co-workers or neighbors who have said something similar to us. Do you know Jesus? Have you found Jesus? No, and the smart aleck in me wants to say I didn't know he was lost. I mean, if I found Jesus. No, but Jesus found me. We're so afraid to share our faith. Sometimes it's because we're afraid people are going to ask us biblical questions that we don't know. Sometimes it's because we don't want to seem rude. Or we don't want to seem like one of those Christians. But I'll tell you something. Most people out there today know about God. They know who Jesus is. They probably believe in him. But they may not be having a personal walk with him. They may not be part of a church family, surrounded by people who will love and care and support them. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, come and see. When we start talking about, and people don't want us to talk about all the technical stuff in the Bible, the facts, they'll just glaze over. They're really not wanting to hear about so much about how Jesus saves us and that we'll go to heaven. Because you know what most people are trying to do right now? They're trying to make it through today. They're having a hard time just putting one foot in front of the other to make it through today, to make it through this week, to raise their family, to support their grown children and their emotionally, and to be there and to help them and watch as your grown children struggle in their lives and your grandchildren. People have problems at work. They may be out of work. You know what? Quite frankly, most people don't care on a cellular level about where they're going to go when they die. They'll worry about that when they get there. They're not sure how they're going to live through this life. So here's what I'd like you to do this week. I want you to literally write this down, because there is something powerful that happens when something goes from our brain through our fingers onto paper. So I seriously want you to literally write this down. I want you to make notes throughout the week about how Jesus has helped you in your time of trials. How your relationship with Jesus Christ, small ways. Just why are you a Christian? Why do you walk with Jesus? What does it do for you? What problems does it solve? What problems does it fix? And then keep reading those and keep those in the forefront of your mind, because that's what people want to hear. That's what people need to hear. They need to have us. When we see them struggling, sit down with them and say, I'm going to pray for you. I can relate to where you're at. And I know how Jesus helped me. When I was in a similar spot, here's what X, Y, and Z. Here's what Jesus did for me. And I know that my faith helped me make it through that. And I'm going to be praying for you that your faith will help you too. It opens the door to a conversation. And if you go to church, invite them to go with you. Because come and see, it's biblical. It's a great marketing slogan. And sharing our faith really is just that simple.